Hey guys, tonight we're going somewhere a little grim. But don't worry, you're already doomed. It's barely dawn in the city of Babylon. And already the dust in your lungs is older than most modern countries. You're lying on a mat that smells like damp clay and ancient feet. And your only alarm clock is the sound of an angry goat bleating outside your window. Your tunic is sticking to your skin like old papyrus. And something with too many legs scuttles across your toes as you groggily sit up. There's a knock at the door, a slow, hollow tap that means one thing. You've been chosen again. Today, you're brewing beer for the gods. Congratulations, or condolences. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, comment below with your location and the local time right now, because wherever you are, it's probably more comfortable than Babylon in 1800 BCE. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You throw on your sandals, which are less footwear and more suggestion, and step into the boiling morning. The street is alive with noise, vendors already shouting, slaves already sweating, and children already covered in mud, although no one's sure where they found it. A stray dog eyes you with a knowing glance. It's been round long enough to know where you're headed, and it's not following. The temple looms in the distance, his stepped cigarette rising like a grumpy giant from the flat earth. You know the way by heart, past the scribe's courtyard, where a boy no older than 12 is already scratching tax records into play, past the meat cellar with the suspiciously shiny cuts, past the sacred fig tree, which has never once produced a fig. You arrive at the outer gates of the brewing compound. They're open, inviting you into a realm of sacred responsibility and inevitable heat stroke. The priest nods at you, expression unreadable under a veil of sweat and incense. You nod back, because you still haven't figured out if you're allowed to talk to him. Inside, the smell hits first. It's a heady stew of yeast, wet straw, old bread, and divine expectation. There's something vaguely sour in the air, like the ghost of 1,000 unfinished breakfasts. You shuffle toward the holding area where the day's crew is assembling. A few familiar faces glance up, some nod. Others are too busy nursing hangovers, both literal and spiritual. You're handed your assignment by a man whose job is mostly yelling and occasionally pointing. Today, you'll be starting with the barley soak again. Your shoulders drop slightly, but there's no use complaining. No one listens, and besides, complaining requires extra energy. You haul a cracked ceramic basin toward the cistern, fill it with water that smells like it might have once been clean, and lug it back to your station. You grab fistfuls of barley hold and gritty and dump them in. The water turns cloudy almost instantly. You stir the mixture with a stick that's probably older than you are. It resists like it has opinions. As the barley soaks, you watch the others setting up the fire pit. It takes for them to coax the embers into flame, which then roars up in a gust of smoke and ambition. A puff of ash lands on your lip. You decide not to taste it this time. A younger worker sneezes into the mash vat and immediately looks round to see if the gods noticed. You all pretend not to. Eventually, the barley is ready. You're ordered to drain it by scooping it out and pressing it through a woven sieve. Your hands go pruny. Your forearms ache. Your back starts whispering ancient curses. You remember that damp tunic. It's wetter now, also somehow heavier. The priest passes by again, muttering something about a feast day for an Inkosi, goddess of beer. You vaguely recall this means twice the usual batch size and none of the usual breaks. You try not to make eye contact. He smells like roasted dates and disappointment. By midday, your hands are stained the color of fermented dusk. The sun has climbed high enough to boil soup on the cobbles. You crouch in what little shade the wall provides and nibble a leftover crust. It's hard as fired clay, but technically edible, sort of like a granola bar with no joy. Someone nearby gags. A batch has gone sourly. A temple rat, those sacred but terribly unhygienic creatures must have fallen in again. There's no time to dwell on it. The gods need their offering, preferably untainted. But honestly, it's not always up to you. You're called over to assist with preparing the fire for the mash boil. This involves carrying heavy jugs of water and feeding the flame with dry reeds and dung bricks. The smell is hard to describe, somewhere between burnt toast and failed civilization. Your eyes water. You keep going. Meanwhile, your phone is dead. But so are your neighbors, and neither can help you now. The mash begins to cook. You stir it constantly to prevent scorching, although scorching is the default setting in this city. The pot gurgles and pops like it's laughing. At you, steam curls round your face, dampening everything that isn't already soaked at one point. A large insect lands in the pot. No one sees it but you. You hesitate. You consider fishing it out. You consider letting the gods enjoy the crunch. Ultimately, you remove it with a twig and mutter an apology skyward. Better safe than spiritually smoked. A little boy runs past, dropping a ceramic cup. It shatters. No one reacts. There's no energy left for concern. The air is thick with heat and exhaustion. A chicken wanders into the courtyard and is immediately shooed away by an apprentice with a stick. The chicken seems used to it. The high priest finally appears, robed in ceremonial linen and an expression of vague dissatisfaction. He inspects the brewing progress with the flair of someone who's never lifted a jug but has many opinions about jug lifting. He nods, barely, and disappears back into the temple's inner sanctum. You return to your station, arms leaden, back stiffer than your mother-in-law's old sandals. The mash is ready to cool. You and two others carry the enormous pot toward the fermentation area. One misstep, and this whole thing becomes a cautionary tale. You make it barely and pour the mixture into a storage vessel that smells faintly of old honey and divine rage. You wipe your forehead. The sun has not moved. Time has slowed, or maybe it's stopped entirely. Either way, you still have hours to go. The priestess walks by humming a hymn to the gods of fertility. You think briefly of asking them to bless your lower back instead. Someone slaps your shoulder. It's the older worker with no teeth and too much confidence. He tells you a story about the time he added a frog to the batch on purpose, for luck. You smile politely and edge away. The day isn't over, but your muscles are. You settle beside a clay wall, watching the mash bubble like it's alive. Maybe it is. Maybe you are. Hard to say. Your feet throb. Your face is streaked with barley. Grime. You smell like someone tried to ferment a person. But you survived the first shift. And the worst part, tomorrow. You'll do it all again. The sun hasn't set. It just hangs there, radiating contempt. You're still sitting against that clay wall, trying not to fall asleep while upright. Unfortunately, the gods do not honor rest periods for low-level brewers. A shout summons you back into motion. It's time to start the fire again. You rise like an elderly tortoise and shuffle toward the hearth, which is already exhaling smoke like it's judging you. The brewing area is louder now, more clatter, more shouting, more sandals slapping on packed turf. Someone's dropped a pot again. You barely glance up. The sound of pottery shattering is basically white noise at this point. You join a few others at the fire pit. Today's fuel, dried reeds, mano bricks, and the occasional sacrificial scrap of fabric that nobody misses. The heat licks at your face, then your neck, then your soul. You're sweating through your tunic again, even though it never fully dried from this morning. Remember that damp tunic. It's still there. It's never not there. They hand you a mixing paddle the size of your arm and send you to stir the newly boiling mash. It's like rowing a canoe through oatmeal if the oatmeal was alive and possibly vindictive. The clay pot groans under its own weight, bubbling with half-fermented barley, sacred spices, and your mounting regrets. Meanwhile, someone brings over a bundle of dates. Not for you, obviously. These are the precious additions that sweeten the brew divine nectar for divine taste buds. They're squashed into a sticky pulp with bare hands that have touched at least 7 different things today that would alarm a modern health inspector. The date paste is added to the bubbling mix. It hisses as it hits, and the smell changes sharper now, sweeter, almost drinkable. Almost, you resist the urge to taste it. That would be sacrilege, or theft, or both. You're not sure. But either way, it's not worth losing an ear over. You're assigned to clean out the holding jugs from the last batch. This is done using river water that's seen better centuries and a brush made from straw and desperation. The jugs are enormous, and you have to climb halfway inside each one to scrub the fermenting sludge from the inner walls. You do this in a haze, occasionally coughing, always sweating, sometimes hallucinating. Modern-day comparison. Picture cleaning a dorm fridge at the end of the semester. Except it's your full-time job, and the dorm god might smite you if you miss a spot. A priest strolls by as you're halfway inside one jug, your legs kicking helplessly in the air like an overturned beetle. He mutters something about a blessing ceremony, and you consider yelling that a real blessing would be a sponge. You don't. You need your tongue for a barley chewing later. You emerge from the jug crusted in a thin layer of old beer and faint despair. A fellow brewer throws you a cloth. You wipe your face and wonder if it made any difference. The cloth smells worse than the jug. A clay tablet near the entrance records daily production amounts. You glance at it on your way past. There's a deep, fresh scratch next to today's date, a priest's way of saying not enough. You squint at the numbers. You're short to jars, and everyone knows it. Tension rises. Another brewer quietly slips an extra date into the current mash to make it ferment faster. Historians still argue whether this actually helped or just made the beer taste like regret. Either way, the shortcut is noted but unspoken. You stir harder. The paddle creaks. Your forearms ache. Your stomach growls. Lunch, if you can call it that, is a handful of leftover gruel from yesterday's offering. It's served cold and slightly crunchy. You pretend not to notice the pebble, or maybe it's a beetle. You swallow and move on. Someone near you starts singing a working chant. It's off-key and mostly nonsense, but the rhythm helps. You pick up the tune, humming along as you haul another jug toward the fermenting pool. Now, here's the thing no one tells you about temple brewing. It's not just labor, it's performance. Every action is observed by priests, by elders, and, if you believe the stories, by the gods themselves. That means no shortcuts, no eye rolls, and certainly no audible complaints. You smile through gritted teeth as your back spasms like a possessed lyre. A priestess floats past with her sacred fan. It's decorated with feathers and likely used, more to signal status than actually cool anyone. Still, you dream of stealing it for 5 minutes just to feel air move across your face. The next step, strain the mash into fermentation jars. This requires one person to hold the vat, another to pour, and a third to filter using a woven reed mat. You get the mat. Congratulations, you are now both filtration system and emotional support for the body. The liquid dribbles through the -1 and into the jars. It's thick, golden, and lumpy in a way that would not pass any modern beverage standard. But here, it's liquid holiness. You let it run through your fingers for a second before a sharp look from a senior brewer reminds you this is not a hot tub. The filled jars are sealed with damp clay and stored in the temple's cool chamber. Cool is a generous term. It's only marginally less stifling than outside and smells like a combination of mold, damp straw, and the ghosts of 100 batches past. You're told to watch the jars. You nod solemnly. There is no watching. You sit beside them, stare into space, and try not to fall asleep. Your body hums from overuse, your eyelids droop. The air is still. Even the flies are too hot to move, eventually. Something thumps near the door. A temple boy arrives with a scroll well, a clay tablet, but functionally a scroll that announces a surprise inspection by the High Seer of Enlil. You sigh deeply. Surprise inspections mean panic. Panic means scrubbing everything twice, including yourself. You're handed a cloth and instructed to polish the jars. You do, carefully wiping their rough surfaces as if the gods themselves will lean down and sniff them. You try not to question why. The priest watching you does not look like he enjoys questions. A whisper from the corner. Don't forget the prayer tokens. Someone's remembered to add the sacred stamp to the jar lids, a small clay disc inscribed with a symbol only the head priest understands. You press one into place, hoping you're not sealing in a batch that will turn sour and anger a celestial being. By this point, your arms are trembling. You haven't sat down in what feels like forever. Your back has become a solid slab of pain. Your feet are blistered. Your hair, once vaguely neat, is now a straw helmet stuck to your skull. And still someone finds a way to yell your name, turns out. The next round of barley has arrived, crates full of rough, unhulled grains. Dropped unceremoniously beside the well, you and 3 others are ordered to begin the winnowing process. This involves scooping barley into wide baskets, tossing it into the air, and letting the breeze carry away the chaff. Except the breeze is gone. The air is dead. Nothing moves but your own slowly evaporating dignity. You toss anyway, over and over, creating your own pathetic wind. Chaff sticks to your face, your tunic, your soul. The barley smells faintly sour. One basket splits open. You tie it with a vine. It still leaks. Meanwhile, a priest nearby claps once, just once. The workers snap to attention. It's time for the evening chant. You line up, barely conscious, and hum the same old verses. Something about purity and honor and barley's sacred burden. You mouth the words. Your legs tremble, and just when you think it's over, someone decides now is the right time to start scrubbing the floors with sand. You take a handful and start scrubbing in circles, pretending not to cry. The gods are watching. After all, eventually, mercifully, you are dismissed. Not with thanks, not with praise, just a grunt and a wave. You limp back toward your home, barley husks in your hair and clay dust coating your elbows on the way. A young boy stops you to ask if you made the beer today. You nod. He wrinkles his nose and says, "It tasted funny." You smile weakly. That's the god's problem now. Sleep doesn't come easy when your bed is a woven mat and your spine is a list of grievances. You lie there, staring up at the cracked ceiling, which may or may not be held together by divine will alone. Outside, a lizard chirps once. Then again, possibly, judging you. Inside, your muscles twitch in protest. Every part of your body has become an unpleasant character in the ongoing drama of barley worship. When the morning trumpet sounds, it's not a trumpet, really. More like a boardman with a conch shell you roll to your side and sigh. Remember that nice dream you were having. Something about a cool breeze and actual chairs, gone. Erased by responsibility and ambient humidity. You rise, already sweating, and once again pull on the tunic. which somehow smells worse despite being completely dry. You head back toward the temple brewery, and on the way, you pass a small shrine. A woman is offering figs to a clay idol of Ninkosi, the beer goddess. You pause just long enough to feel inferior. She has figs, you have blisters. Today's task is barley winnowing. Part 2. You may recall yesterday's windless adventure, tossing grains into the air and hoping physics does its thing. Well, today is much the same, but now the barley is damp. Why is it damp? Because someone stored it near the canal. And the canal did what canals do, leak silently overnight like a passive-aggressive water snake. You and 2 others are instructed to spread the damped barley across clay slabs to dry. The slabs, of course, are already warm from the sun, and soon they're hot enough to cook flatbread. You crouch beside the spread grains and begin turning them slowly with a wooden rake. It's not glamorous, it's barely functional, but it's the sacred process, and that means nobody is allowed to question it, even if half the grain sticks to the slab like burnt rice in a pot. While you rake, the priest's apprentice walks by chewing on something that looks suspiciously like your lunch. He doesn't make eye contact. You consider praying for a mild divine reprimand to befall him, nothing serious. Just maybe a short-lived rash as the barley dries. Your next job is to carry baskets of it into the mill room. Room is a stretch. It's more of a shaded corner with 2 grinding stones and an oppressive sense of fatigue. You're paired with a man known only as Ox. Not because he's strong, he isn't, but because he chews constantly. Like he's ruminating, you greet him with a nod. He responds with a long sniff. You take your position at one end of the stone mill. Ox takes the other. Together, you begin the rhythmic grind, back and forth, turning barley into a rough flour. It's meditative, in the way that watching paint dry while your feet are on fire might be meditative. Dust rises in plumes, your nostrils clog, your hands turn grainy. Modern equivalent. Think of grinding coffee by hand for 14 hours straight while someone breathes hot bread breath in. Your face, that's your day dot as you work. An older woman passes through with a pot of something steaming. She mutters a warning not to let the barley rest too long or it'll summon the wrong spirit. You nod respectfully, though historians still argue whether she means an actual spirit or just mold. Either way, you keep grinding. Once milled, the flour is dumped into enormous mixing troughs. Here begins the transformation from dry powder to sacred sludge. Water is added sparingly. Date paste is folded in. A few mystery herbs make an appearance, possibly for flavor, possibly for show. The mixture grows thick, then thicker, until your paddle stands upright in it like a flag of resignation. You stir and stir and stir. Your arms begin to hum. Your legs go numb. A bee buzzes past and pauses near your ear, as if considering whether to join the brew. Somewhere nearby, a priest blesses another batch. You catch only fragments, purity of process, gifts of the earth, unseen eyes. You wonder if the gods would mind if you sat down for just nope. Someone claps, and you're reminded to keep stirring. Once the porridge reaches the right consistency, thick, glutinous, and exactly the color of regret, it's time to begin shaping it into loaves. These are not bread loaves, they are sacred beer cakes. Half-baked and full of barley, used as fermentation anchors in the giant vats, you're handed a lump and instructed to mold. The texture is somewhere between wet clay and mashed beans. You form it into rough patties and lay them on warm stones to firm up. Flies are very interested. You swat at them with a reed fan that barely moves air, but makes you feel productive. One of the loaves falls apart. You pretend not to see it. The gods see everything, but you're hoping they'll understand you are hungry, overworked, and also may be cursed, while the loaves firm. The vats are being prepared. These are not small containers. They are giant ceramic monsters large enough to fit 2 people inside. Though no one volunteers, you help clean one with a bundle of reeds soaked in a vinegar solution that smells suspiciously like failed wine. You lean into the vat, scrubbing. Inside, it echoes like a tomb. You hum a tune just to break the silence, and your own voice startles you. When the loaves are ready, they're crumbled into the vats, becoming the foundation of the beer to be. More hot water is poured over them, along with fresh date syrup, and the whole mess is left to ferment in the sweltering chamber that the temple insists is sacredly ventilated. It's not. The smell is intense, earthy, yeasty, slightly changy. It's like someone made soup out of bread and left it out for 3 days. You stir it slowly, watching bubbles rise and pop with lethargic resignation. A fly lands in the vat. You flick it out. Another replaces it. You flick again. It becomes a game of futility. You lose dot as you finish the string. A younger assistant slips and nearly falls in. He catches himself on the rim and laughs nervously. No one joins him. Falling into the vat is both dangerous and profoundly disrespectful. Also very sticky. Later, as you prepare to close the vat with a heavy stone lid, you notice a crack forming in the base. You mention it to a priest, who waves it off. The gods will hold it. You sincerely hope so. Back in the courtyard, the sun begins to slide lower in the sky, but the heat remains cruel. You sit briefly in the shade, watching another crew carry full vats to the inner sanctum. Your work is done for now. Then someone calls your name again. Turns out the temple cats have gotten into the date storage again. You are handed a broom and a jar of pungent oil and told to make it. Unpleasant for them. You wave the broom and splash all round, hoping to discourage the cats without invoking feline vengeance. One cat glares at you from the roof. You whisper a truce and retreat. Dinner is served in the workers' quarters. It's thin gruel, half, a fig, and a generous portion of silence. You eat without speaking, every motion a labor. Someone across from you says they heard a batch from last week made a nobleman sick. They whisper that he accused the brewer of insulting the gods. Historians still argue whether the illness came from bad beer or bad politics. Either way, the brewer hasn't been seen since. You don't finish your brew. You don't want to know what's floating in it. As night falls, you drag yourself home. Your feet have become to slabs of callus. Your hands won't unkill. Your eyelids are hot and heavy. You pass the shrine again. The figs are gone. In their place is a cup of beer, still frothy, still warm, still sacred. You bow slightly, not to the cup, to the exhaustion. It deserves your respect. The next morning, your legs refuse. They simply decide, in their own language of soreness and heat, that standing is a concept they can no longer endorse. You lie on your mat longer than usual, trying to will yourself upright through sheer guilt. The brewery won't run itself. The barley won't mash itself. The gods won't smite themselves, though you wish they'd try. You finally rise, bones clicking like a poorly tuned lyre. Your tunic, ever loyal in its dampness, is already sticking to your back by the time you shuffle out the door. There's no breeze. Again, the air is thick, slow, and somehow personal. You feel watched by the very humidity itself. Today is fermentation day, a day that promises less heavy lifting, but far more heavy smells. The brew has been sitting overnight in its massive clay vat, a stew of barley loaf crumbs. Sacred date, sup, and all your lingering doubts The lid is lifted with ceremony, meaning to priests chanting while you and a helper grunt under the weight of the stone cap. The smell escapes like a mythological creature worm, yeasty, with the undernote of socks left in a tomb. You take it in with a resigned sniff. That's the scent of progress. Your job this morning. Monitor the bubbles, not burst them, not stir them, just watch and note. You sit beside the vat with a wooden tablet and a pointed stick. Marking every time the surface belches, you pretend. You're keeping count. You are, in fact, dozing with your eyes open. A priest walks past and asks if the spirits are awakening. You nod solemnly, though what you really want to say is, they're gussy. And so am I. You do not. You simply nod again. Eventually, you're told to add a new handful of sacred herbs. You don't know what they are, no one does, but they grow behind the temple and smell like burned mint. You crush them between your fingers and sprinkle the powder into the brew. The color shifts slightly. You take this as a sign that the gods approve, or at least that the brew is now marginally less terrifying. You take your seat again. Watching the bubbles rise, the surface is alive, like an ancient soup trying to escape, occasionally. You swear it's trying to form words. You don't listen. That's a dangerous game. Meanwhile, you remember your neighbor woman who once tripped into a fermentation vat while delivering a message she claimed to have seen in Kossi herself. Standing in the foam with arms of grain and a crown of barley. She also spent the next week talking to frogs. The frogs did not respond. As you sit, flies gather. One lands on your arm and refuses to leave. You wave. It returns. You wave again. It takes this as a challenge, eventually. You flick it into the vat and say nothing. A young brewer nearby is humming a song you vaguely remember from childhood. Something about beer is bread that floats. The chorus involves a lot of slurred syllables and rhythmic foot stomping. You hum along. It helps. Then comes the first real task of the day, skimming. A wooden paddle is thrust into your hands, and you're instructed to scrape the foam and solids off the top of the fermenting vat. This is delicate work. Remove too much, and the beer weakens. Remove too little, and the gods might burp angrily, possibly through lightning. You skim slowly, carefully, the paddle dragging thick, golden clumps from the surface. Some of it looks like porridge, some of it looks like old dreams. You place it into a discard bowl and hope it doesn't come back to haunt you. Your arms tire quickly, but there's no time to rest. The fermentation is peaking. The mixture gurgles like it has opinions. The priestess returns and drops in a tiny clay figurine, a symbol of divine fertility, meant to bless the beer. It sinks immediately. She frowns. You do too. A side note, historians still debate whether these figurines were symbolic or simply a convenient way to dispose of excess temple crafts. Either way, the vat now contains one. You're told to taste the mixture next. Not a lot, just a drop, to check for progress. You dip a finger in and bring it to your tongue. It's sour, thick, not unpleasant, but definitely not ready. You nod wisely and mutter something about another half day. The priest nods as if he agrees. The day continues in a haze of observation. You're moved from vat to vat, repeating the process. Skim, stir, sprinkle herbs, taste. Each batch has its own personality. One is too fizzy, one is too flat, one smells like wet bricks. You work through them like a monk of fermentation. By midday, you're coated in a film of sweat and beer residue. You step into the shade, hoping for a breeze. None comes instead. Someone hands you a task scroll. You've been reassigned to the cooling team. Cooling sounds pleasant. It is not. Your job is to carry large amphorae of finished beer down into the temple's lower chamber dump. Narrow space meant to keep the brew cool. It's only slightly less oppressive than the sun above. The air is thick. The stone walls drip. You descend the steps sideways because the amphora is nearly your size, and the path is not generous. You place the amphora in a carved-out section of floor and cover it with damp straw. This is ancient refrigeration. You admire the effort, even as your spine screams in protest. You repeat this process 6 times. By the 4th, you stopped pretending not to groan. By the 5th, your vision blurs. By the 6th, you whisper a small curse that you hope no god hears. You stumble back, upstairs, clutching the wall. Someone gives you a bowl of water. It's warm, but you drink it like it's ambrosia. Your head clears slightly. Your knees do not, while you rest. You watch another team prepare the offering jars, the actual vessels that will be presented to the gods during the evening ritual. These are smaller, more ornate, and adorned with symbolic carvings. You note one shows barley stalks ranged like dancing women. Another shows a lion drinking from a cup. You wonder if lions drank beer. You decide not to ask. One jar is passed to you to fill. You do so carefully, pouring the finished beer through a reed funnel. The beer is thick but smooth. A foamy layer settles at the top. You wipe the rim and place the jar on the offering tray. A chant begins in the distance. That's your cue. You and the other brewers walk slowly, silently, carrying the trays to the altar. The priests lead, draped in linen and authority, behind them. Incense bearers wave aromatic plumes that do little to mask the smell of fermented labor. At the altar, each jar is placed precisely. There are murmured blessings, gestures in the air, a moment of silence. Then a priest raises one jar and sips. The room holds its breath. He nods, just once. Everyone exhales. The jars are left there, basking in the divine gaze. No one touches them now. They are sacred. Tomorrow, they'll likely be consumed by high officials or repurposed for temple guests. But for now, they are proof that the gods have not been insulted. Today, you return to the brewery exhausted. You are handed a simple meal, barley cakes and boiled onions. You chew slowly, staring at your hands. They're cracked and stained. They look like they belong to someone old. As night falls, you walk home past the same shrine. A different offering sits there now, a small cup and a folded cloth. You pause, not to pray, not to rest. Just to breathe. You don't hear the conch shell this morning. You feel it. The vibration rattles the dust from the thatched ceiling, and something small scurries under your mat. You open one eye and consider pretending to be dead. But the gods would know, and so would your supervisor. Your body stages a quiet revolt as you sit up, knees stiff, back locked, palms blistered from paddlework. You swing your legs over the mat and discover your ankles have achieved the consistency of clay. The air smells like someone cooked bread, then let it rot. You suspect that smell is you. The brewery compound greets you with the usual scents: yeast, firewood, sweat. But this morning there's a new layer: urgency. Today is feast day. A temple festival in honor of Shamash, god of justice and sunlight. You find the irony particularly cruel, since no justice has ever protected you from barley duty in the heat. Your first task: haul fresh clay vessels from the kiln. These are for today's ceremonial batch, which must be brewed and served same day. Divine freshness, the priest calls it. Divine nightmare, you mutter. The kiln is at the far edge of the compound. You pass workers already hurrying, with sacks of cracked grain. One of them sneezes barley dust into the air like a holy offering. You nod grimly. At the kiln, the vessels are still warm. You wrap your arms round one and immediately regret it. It's like hugging a brick oven. You hiss, then hold tighter. Dropping it would mean death if not by gods, then by the potter. You carry 3 in total, staggering back like a drunk beetle on stilts. By the 3rd trip, your shoulder is screaming. The temple dog follows you, panting and judgmental, back at the courtyard. Preparations are in full chaos. Fires are already roaring. Apprentices are slicing dates with knives that may or may not have been cleaned since last harvest. You're handed a list scratched into a clay tile. Your job is the ceremonial mashed up dispatches. Different, instead of rough barley bread, you'll be using barley cakes flavored with honey, spices, and shame. You crush them by hand into a paste, adding just enough water to form a thick slurry. The result is both divine and suspiciously sticky. The mash goes into a polished vat, reserved only for festival days. It's carved with symbols you don't recognize, but you pretend to. One looks like a bird. One might be a god. One is definitely just a fish. You stir carefully. The crowd begins to gather outside the temple gate. Nobles, priests, merchants in fancy tunics that have never seen grain dust. They sip perfumed drinks and dab their faces with dyed cloths. You, meanwhile, are pouring hot water into a fermentation vat while a beetle crawls down your collar. The heat climbs. The vat begins to bubble. You stir with a reed paddle wrapped in linen to keep the foam down. A priest hovers nearby, correcting your posture. The gods favor symmetry, he says. You smile and consider smiting him with the paddle. Once the mixture reaches the right consistency, the fermentation begins in earnest. But there's no time to let it sit for a day. This is express fermentation. You've added twice the herbs, twice the date syrup, and whispered a short apology to your intestines in advance. The priest blesses the mixture with a sprig of some plant you've never seen before. Imported, he says proudly, from Elam. You nod as if that means anything. You help pour the fast brew into jars and cover them with a layer of woven reeds to strain up the clumps. The reeds shift slightly as the liquid settles. You notice one jar foaming more than the others. You point it out. The priest shrugs, the god's-like personality, just before the ceremony begins. A boy is sent to collect a sample for the high priest's personal table. You're asked to sweeten it discreetly. This means adding a bit of honey to his cup and stirring until it tastes less like regret. You hand it off, and the boy scurries away. You do not ask what happens if the priest disapproves. You already know. Then comes the march. Everyone in the brewing compound lines up, carrying jars, fans, incense, and an alarming number of symbolic vegetables. You carry a jug with both arms, barely balanced, as the group moves in unison toward the festival altar. The sun is merciless. Your feet slide on stone steps worn smooth by centuries of similar suffering. You feel like a breadcrumb under a magnifying glass. At the altar, the ceremony begins, chanting, bowing, a brief dance performed by young acolytes who look like they've never lifted a jug in their lives. Then comes the moment, the ceremonial pouring. You're chosen. You step forward, lift your jug, and pour a steady stream of warm, sacred beer onto the altar stone. It splashes across the surface and drips into a carved channel that funnels it to a small pool where it will sit, slowly souring. As a sign of abundance, the crowd watches. A priest nods, a breeze stirs. For a moment, you feel seen not by people, but by time. You're part of a ritual older than bronze. Then the priest says, "We need more." You sigh, back at the brewery. You're ordered to prepare another batch, a simpler one. They say, less ceremonial, more functional. It's for the after feast, when guests will demand a drink and expect not to wait. This batch is made in a hurry. Crushed barley, Hot water. Leftover dates. No herbs. No singing. You stir with efficiency and contempt. It smells. Serviceable. While it brews, you snake a sip. It's rough. Thick. Slightly tangy. Better than yesterday's bowl water. Though not by much. You wipe your mouth and keep string. Later. You help fill clay cups for distribution to festival guests. One man spills half of his on your arm and calls it a blessing. You nod through clenched teeth. By nightfall, the courtyard is a maze of empty vessels and drunk nobles. The sacred pool overflows with backwash. The priesthood sings slower. A goat has wandered onto the altar and refuses to leave. You watch it, sipping lukewarm leftovers from a cracked cup. It's the best moment of your day. You clean up as the stars emerge. The clay vessels are stacked, the altars washed. Someone sweeps barley husks into a pile and sets it ablaze. The fire crackles. It smells like endings. You walk home, slower than usual. Your tunic is stiff with sacred beer. Your feet blister anew. Your arms swing like sacks of sand. At your door. You pause. Your neighbor sits outside, holding her own cup. Good festival, she asks. You shake your head. Still brewing for the gods. You nod. She smiles, tilts her cup. They're lucky, you grunt. You don't believe it, but you sit beside her anyway, cup in hand, staring up at stars that looked exactly the same yesterday, and probably will tomorrow. By now, you've stopped expecting to feel rested in the mornings. Sleep is something that visits other people who don't stir beer vats for celestial beings with wildly specific taste. You wake with your mouth tasting faintly of old barley, your back folded like an unread scroll, and your tunic already halfway glued to your ribs. The only comfort is that today cannot possibly be worse than yesterday. You're wrong. At the temple gates, a priest meets you with a heavy look and heavier instructions. The honey is gone. He says flatly, all of it. You blink slowly. The honey is not just an ingredient, it's the divine sweetener. The only thing that makes the beer bearable to gods and mortals alike. Without it, the drink will taste like grain water left out during flood season. Your new job, fix it, somehow. You're sent to the market district with a satchel of grain chits and a command to convince the vendors to part with any remaining honey. You know this errand is punishment, not just because it's far, but because it involves talking to people who don't already smell like beer foam. You pass the usual chaos of the city's outer quarters, chickens weaving between carts, street vendors shouting over each other about dates, garlic, and very suspicious dried fish. You reach the honey stall, only to be told there's none left. A caravan was delayed, the vendor says, shrugging as if that solves anything. You stand there, blinking, hoping he'll just find some by divine accident. Instead, he offers you a pot of something he calls be nectar substitute. You open it. It smells like fermented figs and lies. You take it anyway. What choice do you have? Back at the brewery, the substitute honey is poured carefully into a trial batch. The result, sludgy, slightly sour, and vaguely fruity. Like someone tried to make wine out of porridge. You stare into the vat. It stares back. You're instructed to mask the taste with herbs. You use every leaf, root, and pod you can scavenge from the temple's drying racks. The mixture smells like an ancient garden funeral. You hand a sample to the overseer. He sips, pauses, nods. The gods will endure, he says. That's the closest thing to approval you've ever received. The batch is processed and set to ferment in the smaller ceremonial jars. These are more delicate, shaped like birds and lions, meant to please the gods aesthetically, if not gastronomically. You pour the mixture in, watching it bubble and fizz like it's arguing with itself. Your next task involves scrubbing yesterday's vats again. You consider staging a silent Protest by pretending to become that yourself. You crouch inside, knees pressed to your chest, while scrubbing the walls with a bundle of reeds tied together with goat twine. The smell is deep and personal. The kind of smell that gets under your fingernails and into your dreams. Modern comparison. Imagine cleaning a slow cooker that someone used to make meat stew and then forgot about for a week, except it's sacred, and you're barefoot, halfway through. A spider the size of your thumb descends into the vat. You make eye contact. It does not blink. You name it Ninkosi's cousin and continue scrubbing round it. Outside the vat, his storm is brewing literally. Clouds have gathered overhead, and the sky turns the color of spoiled milk. Someone whispers that Enlil is displeased. Someone else says it's just weather. Historians still argue whether temple storms were interpreted as divine moods or coincidental climate. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of the canal and the promise of rain. You're instructed to move the fermentation jars under cover. You and 3 others lift the heavy vessels onto reed mats and shuffle them toward the inner sanctum, dodging puddles that are definitely not just water. On the way, one jar slips. You catch it barely, your shoulder jarring as the weight slams back against your body. The priest overseeing you mutters a quick chant to ward off disaster. You just mutter. Back inside, the rain starts to fall in earnest. Thick drops pound the roof like angry barley kernels. The brewery becomes a chamber of echoes. Workers shout over the din. Someone tries to use a pot as a hat. You're reassigned to the ingredient storage hut, a place only marginally less moldy than the vats. You inventory the sacks of barley, scribbling on a clay tablet with a stylus made from a snap tree. Your hands cramp, the numbers blur. Your nose itches. You scratch it with your elbow. A priest appears to check your progress. He frowns at the tally marks and adds one more, then walks away smugly. You resist the urge to throw the stylus at him. Barely next, you help prepare the sacrificial gruel, a thick mixture of mashed barley, burnt herbs, and just enough flavor to make the gods pretend they're impressed. It's poured into small jars and sealed with cloth. You taste one. It's gritty and bitter, like sadness boiled in a pot. This gruel will be offered alongside the beer tonight. It must be perfect in appearance, if not taste. You trim the edges of the cloth, press small barley symbols into the tops and range them in rows on an altar tray. One is slightly lopsided. You nudge it gently. It collapses completely. You nudge the others to match. Outside, the rain continues. The courtyard is a shallow lake. Workers trudge through it with sandals full of mud and ambition. The air smells like wet straw and old wishes. You're told to light incense for purification. You find the bundle of twigs and resin, spark it against a stone, and wave the smoke over the vats. The smell is sharper, pine, and something vaguely medicinal. You feel cleaner. Though that's probably just hope. Evening comes. The ceremony begins. This time, it's small and no festival. Just a quiet offering for the gods to thank them for the rain or apologize for the beer. It's unclear. You place the jars carefully on the altar. The priest chants. The wind sighs through the temple. Rafters. A drop of water falls into one jar. No one sees. You look away. Afterward, you help clean. Always cleaning. The offerings are moved. The altar is wiped. The jars are rinsed and stacked. One cracks in your hands. You hide the shard and hope the gods like mosaics. You're dismissed in the dark. No moon tonight. Just clouds and the smell of soaked barley. You walk home barefoot because your sandals gave up halfway through the day. At your door, you sit in the mud. Just sit. Your neighbor walks by and offers you a piece of fig. You accept. It's dry, chewy, sweet. You chew in silence and stare at the sky. No stars. Just steam rising from your skin and the sound of brewing in your ears. You've started dreaming in barley. Not just of it in it. Last night you were a single grain, tumbling endlessly through a giant clay jar, trying to find your way to the surface before someone mashed you into divine porridge. You wake with your heart pounding and your tunic inexplicably damp again. It's not even hot yet. Today's assignment is posted on a chipped tablet hanging by the brewery gate. Vat cleaning again. Of course, you briefly consider faking illness. But remember last time someone tried that. He ended up being assigned to latrine duty and cleaning the brewery cat's corner of the storage room. You put one foot in front of the other. You're joined by 3 other workers, Ox, still chewing on something unidentified. Mira, who hums off-key temple songs while scrubbing, and a newcomer, a wide-eyed boy who still thinks the gods care about worker morale. You envy him. You each climb into your assigned vat. It's cool inside, which would be a blessing if it didn't smell like ancestral compost, and feet you lower yourself into the muck with a sigh. The floor is slimy, and every scrape of your reed brush comes with a squelch. The walls are stained with residue from batches past, thick. Crusty rings of foam ghosts. You scrub in wide, circular motions, trying to ignore the odd patches of green and the occasional beetle that has chosen this vat as its final resting place. You scoop it out and whisper a benediction. From outside the vat, someone throws in a gourd of cleaning solution and a stringent blend of vinegar, ash, and optimism. It splashes against your legs. You smell like pickled beer now. You ask Mira what day it is. She shrugs. 3rd of shame ash, maybe. Or 5th. Time means little when every sunrise is marked by the same back-breaking rhythm of barley and clay. You nod and return to your circular scrubbing, a modern-day equivalent. Think of cleaning a kiddie pool filled with lukewarm oatmeal. But the pool judges you, and so does the oatmeal. After the vats, you are moved to what the priests call the yeast station. It's a generous term. It's really just a clay wall stained with centuries of gunk and supposedly magical properties. The elders say the yeast lives in the brewery, clinging to the walls, passed down from generation to generation like a sour-smelling heirloom. Your job is to scrape the good yeast, the golden kind. Your supervisor says from crevices using a sharpened spatula carved from bone. You're not sure if it's golden or just mildly less gray than the rest. You scrape carefully, collecting the flakes into a ceramic bowl. A priest watches you, arms crossed. Not too deep, he warns. You might anger the spirits. You nod. You're not sure if he means yeast spirits or ancestors, but neither. Sounds like something you want to meet. The boy beside you asks where the yeast really comes from. You open your mouth to answer, then close it again. It finds us. You say vaguely, it's what you were told. It's what you'll pass on. With your bowl of yeast secured, you move to the mixing station, where today's new batch is already underway. The barley has been soaked and mashed into a warm, gooey paste. You add your precious flakes, stirring them in gently while murmuring the sacred brewing phrase. Bubble gently, rise true. It's partly tradition, partly desperate hope. The mixture begins to fizz. You step back, pleased, until a second later, a large bubble bursts and splatters across your chest. Acidic and fragrant. You wipe it off with the hem of your tunic. You've stopped reacting. The priest returns and inspects the mixture. He declares it lively. You are not sure if that's good or if it means you've accidentally created sentient beer. You nod politely and pretend to understand. Next, you help prepare the tasting samples, small cups drawn from each vat to test the fermentation's progress. The tasters are not high priests or nobles. There you Brewers, because only someone who's been scrubbing these vats since dawn can truly know when the flavor is just the right blend of sour and barely tolerable. You sip from the first cup. Too flat, the second. Too sharp, the third. Surprisingly smooth. You swirl it in your mouth like a connoisseur and say, "Let it sit 1 more hour." The priest nods approvingly. You feel momentarily important. Outside, the temple dog barks at something invisible, possibly a spirit, possibly a chicken. The courtyard smells like wet grain and impending rain again. You return to the vats to add fresh herbs, dried sage, and crushed fenugreek pods. You sprinkle them in slowly, feeling like a magician and a cook at the same time. The mixture darkens, rickens. You stir gently, humming the same chant Mira was singing earlier. It doesn't help your mood, but it masks the buzzing in your ears. The boy asks if you believe the beer really reaches the gods. You think for a moment. I think they get the idea. You say. He smiles, then drops his string stick into the vat. You fish it out with your elbow. The gods will understand. Later, while transferring the beer into amphory for cooling, you notice one has cracked at the base. You plug it with a bit of beeswax. It holds for now. You mark the jar with a clay seal to remember which one not to serve the high priest's daughters. Evening approaches. You help prepare the cold cellar. Cellar being a polite word for a pit lined with straw and wishful thinking. You climb down with rope and balance the jars in rows, one by one, surrounded by damp cloth and reed mats. The boy asks why the gods don't just drink wine. You explain, with the gravity of tradition. That beer is the drink of creation, the sip of earth, water, and fire combined. Also, the vineyard was destroyed in the last flood. He nods solemnly. You are not sure he believes you. Dinner that night is better than usual. Someone overcooked the barley cakes so they're slightly crunchy. A small luxury. Mira shares a fig. Ox sneezes and claims it's a blessing. You eat in silence, staring at your calloused hands, which now smell permanently of yeast and smoke. Before you leave, you're asked to sweep the storage hut. You find a mouse, it finds you. You agree to ignore each other. You sweep round it, outside. The air is thick and still. The stars blink lazily, as if even they're too tired to shine. You walk home barefoot again, your sandals left behind for the gods to steal. You pass the shrine. Someone has left a cup of beer and a string of onions. You consider stealing the onions. You don't dot at your door. You sit and let the quiet settle. The brewery behind you gurgles faintly. Or maybe that's just your stomach. You lean your head back. Close your eyes and whisper, bubble gently. Rise true. There is no morning, only barley. You open your eyes, but it's not quite light. The air in your room is thick, and there's a strange scent, part mildew, part temple incense. You sit up, slowly, because fast no longer exists in your vocabulary. Your neck cracks like an old cartwheel. Outside, someone is singing. It's not cheerful. You wrap yourself in your tunic, which, at this point, has achieved a permanent dampness that suggests it's grown its own ecosystem. You trudge to the temple compound, your feet dragging like someone who's just realized there's no bread left and they're still on bakery duty. Today's assignment is posted near the grain storage wall. Ritual supervision. Solar equinox. Your heart sinks. Ritual supervision sounds fancy, but it means one thing standing for hours while priests chant. Gods glare, and you're expected to be both invisible and entirely alert. Also, beer will be poured, a lot of beer, by you. First task, inventory the ceremonial vessels. There are 27 of them, each with its own symbolic purpose. One is for Enlil, god of wind. Another for Ishtar, goddess of war and awkward dinner. Conversation. One has a lion sculpted into the base. You're told that's for whoever's watching today. You scrub each vessel with a bundle of reeds dipped in vinegar. The lion vessel snarls at you. You snarl back. The gods don't intervene. The equinox ceremony is one of the big ones. Half the city turns up in their finest linen. And you haven't even washed your face. You're given a jug of early batch beer and told to circulate through the crowd, offering sips to those deemed worthy. That mostly means priests, elders, and whoever donated the most goats this year. You enter the plaza with the jug balanced carefully on your hip. The sun is just beginning to rise directly over the temple spire, casting long shadows like fingers reaching for something they'll never grasp. A hush falls. The high priest steps forward. He raises his hands. You stop mid-step. He begins to speak in that slow, echoing voice that all priests seem to master. Have chant, have condescension. You zone out after the fifth divine light of Shamash. Not that it matters. You know your cue. When he nods subtly, you step forward and pour the first cup. This one is for the gods. It's poured onto the altar stone, where it bubbles and steams slightly. Someone whispers, "The gods are drinking it." You whisper back, "No, it's just hot." No one laughs. The ritual proceeds. You move between participants, pouring tiny sips of sacred beer into delicate clay cups. Some drink reverently. Some spill half of it on their robes. One woman chugs hers and winks at you. You pretend not to see it. You step carefully through the rows of observers. The plaza is packed. The stones are hot under your sandals. The jug grows lighter. Your arms ache from holding it at just the right ceremonial angle. You are 90% posture, 10% barley fumes. Modern-day comparison. Imagine being a wine steward at a wedding where the bride is the sun and the guests all think they're immortal. Suddenly, someone drops a cup. It shatters loudly. Everyone turns. The priest's chant wavers. You freeze. The man who dropped it looks round in panic. Then a child starts crying. The priest lifts his hands high and declares, "The gods have heard us." Everyone nods solemnly. You keep pouring. After the ceremony, the altar is anointed with oil, herbs, and the remainder of the beer. You're tasked with collecting the cups, every single one. Some still have sips in them. Some are cracked. A few have suspicious substances that you try not to analyze too closely. You stack them in a clay tray and hold them back to the washing station, where Ox greets you with his usual toothless grin. "Holy leftovers," he says, holding up a cup with tabbies floating in it. You don't ask what he plans to do with it. Once the ceremony vessels are clean, you return to the brewing yard. Someone has started a fresh batch in honor of the equinox, and guess who gets to start? That's right. You. The mash is thicker than usual. More grain, less water. Possibly because someone misread the ratios, or possibly because the gods demand richness. You stir with a reed paddle, pushing against a resistance that feels emotional. Your muscles protest. You tell them to hush. The priest overseeing this batch has opinions. He insists you stir clockwise only, and that you hum during the process. You try. You get to notes in before your voice cracks. He frowns. You pretend it's a sacred silence. By midday, the heat has returned with new enthusiasm. You pause for a water break, and someone hands you a cup. It smells like old onions. You drink it anyway. A messenger arrives with a sealed tablet. There's been a request from the palace. The royal steward wants a sample of today's brew. You are chosen as the bearer. You nod, you bow. You try not to groan audibly. The palace is uphill, of course, and the jug is full. You walk carefully through the city, dodging donkeys, cots, and citizens with strong opinions about your footwear. The jug sloshes. You mutter prayers to Ninkasi that it doesn't spill. At the palace gates, the guard waves you in with all the ceremony of someone waving away a fly. You enter the service corridor and wait beside a wall painted with triumphant lions. You feel more like the goat in the corner. The steward appears. He's tall, polished, and smells like cedar. He takes the jug, sips, and nods. Passable. He says, "That's it." You walk back to the brewery empty-handed and full of resentment. When you return, the batch has finished fermenting. It's time to strain it into amphora. You help lift the giant vat, tipping it toward the reed filter that separates the liquid from the sediment. It dribbles out thick and foamy, like bread soup. You catch a whiff, better than usual, still not drinkable by modern standards. One jar cracks at the base. You watch the beer leak out slowly. No one says anything. You just let it go. Dinner is late. A thunderstorm delays the meal. You eat in the brewery under a sheltering roof: barley, cakes, mashed lentils, and a strip of dried goat. The boy beside you asks if it's always like this. You nod. He sighs. Someone starts humming again. Mir, probably. The sound bounces off the vats and into your bones. As you walk home, you glance up at the night sky. The stars are clearer tonight. The air is cooler. Your arms still ache, and your feet still hate you. But for a moment, you can breathe. You pass the shrine again. Someone's left a little loaf of barley bread shaped like a fish. You smile. You don't take it, but you nod at it. Respectfully. The next day starts not with a horn or a conch or even a shout, but with silence and settling. Loaded silence. You wake up, confused by the absence of noise. The usual bustle: the priests pacing, the goats arguing, the brewery doors creaking open is missing. For a terrifying moment, you think you've overslept. You scramble upright, but no outside. The streets are still hushed. Something's wrong. You throw on your tunic, which now crackles when you bend your arms. It has, perhaps, transcended cloth and become something else, some fusion of sweat, yeast, and divine stubbornness. You stagger toward the temple, and halfway, there you find the reason for the quiet. Everyone's gathered in the central courtyard. Not for a festival, not for a fire, for a funeral. A brewer died last night. An older one, someone who'd been with the temple longer than most of the priests. You didn't know him well. You remember his limp, the way he stirred with his whole body, the way he always muttered about ratios like they were spells. His name escapes you, and the guilt settles low in your belly. The priests chant a farewell as his body, wrapped in linen, is carried through the courtyard. A clay cup is placed beside him, his final offering. You know what's inside. Beer. Always beer, even now, when it's sour, warm, and barely fermented. They say the gods drink with the dead. You stay silent, head lowered, until the procession moves on. The crowd disperses quickly. Work waits for no one, not even the dearly departed. But your steps drag today. There's weight in your chest, and it's not just the heat. Your assignment, distribution duty. You're tasked with delivering large amphora of beer from the brewery to various corners of the temple complex. The kitchens, the guest chambers, the priest's quarters. Everyone wants their share, especially after death. To honor him, they say. You suspect it's to forget. The jars are tall, round, and never balanced properly. You hoist one onto your shoulder, bones creaking like temple gates. The neck digs into your collarbone, the weight uneven. You walk slowly, wobbling slightly with each step. Barley sloshing behind you like the world's heaviest water balloon. Your first stop is the priest's dining hall. You place the amphora down, and immediately someone insists it must be rotated properly for ritual purposes. You rotate it, then again, then once more. Until you're fairly certain the priest is just doing this for amusement, the next amphor goes to the ceremonial guest room. There's a scribe there who looks like he hasn't blinked in days. He grunts, takes a cup, and returns to his tablet without acknowledging your existence. You bow anyway. By mid-morning, your tunic is soaked again. Your shoulder is bruised. Your patience has evaporated. You return to the brewery, where Mira greets you with a faint smile and a basket of roasted grain. Eat, she says. You're walking like a broken jug. You chew slowly, and the grain tastes like ash and faint sweetness. She sits beside you for a while, neither of you speaking. It's the most peaceful moment you've had in days. Then the apprentice arrives. He's pale, panicked, and holding a broken jug, a batch spoiled. He stammers. You follow him to the fermentation room. One of the vats smells off. Very off. Not like barley. Not like date syrup. Something sour. Something wrong. You lean over and inhale. It hits you immediately, like a slap from a vinegar-soaked fish. You know the smell. A bad batch, possibly contaminated by improper sealing, or overripe dates, or worse, a foreign herb dropped in accidentally. You dip a reed into the brew and taste it. It's sharp, acidic, almost fizzy in a way that beer should never be. The priest overseeing this, that arrives and blames the apprentice. The apprentice blames the reeds. The reeds blame no one, being reeds. You're asked to fix it. You gather a bundle of wild mint and the remaining imported herbs. You stir them in carefully, hoping to mask the taste. You let it sit. You stir again. The brew hisses. The priest hovers. You take another taste. Still sour. Still wrong. You try diluting it with water. Then with boiled barley water. Nothing helps. It's like trying to unferment a thunderstorm. You declare the batch unsalvageable. The priest sighs, then orders. It dumped. You and two others carry the mess of vat out back and tip it over. The beer glugs into the earth, frothing slightly. It smells like failure. The apprentice hangs his head. Do the gods get angry when we waste beer? He asks. You think of the funeral? No. You say softly. They understand. You spend the rest of the day cleaning the fermentation room, scrubbing every corner, every crack, in case that sourness lingers. The air smells medicinal now, thick with ash and mint and something less tangible guilt. Maybe. Later, you walk to the garden behind the temple. Not many know about it. Just a small square of dry plants and one stubborn fig tree. You sit beneath it, away from the shouting, away from the vats. A bee hovers near your face. You don't flinch. It lands on your arm, then drifts toward the tree. You watch it go. It's the only creature here working harder than you. As the sun sets, a priest finds you. He hands you a small cup, left over from the feast batch. He says, unspoiled. You sip. It's not great, but it's warm and smooth and steady. He sits beside you and doesn't speak. You stay until the stars blink on, one by one, and for once, nothing breaks. You dream of canals, long, winding, sluggish rivers dragging silt through the city's veins. In the dream, you're carrying an amphor twice your size, walking knee-deep in mud. The canal water whispers your name, and you almost drop the jug just to hear it again. When you wake, your mouth is dry and your legs ache from imaginary slush. Today begins with an announcement. The brewery's main water basin is nearly empty, apparently. The canal that feeds the temple has slowed to a trickle overnight. No one knows why. The priest suggests it's a trial from the gods. Ox suggests someone upstream is stealing water again. Mira just mutters, I told you this would happen. The point is, you're going to get wet today, but not in the way that helps. You're assigned to the water hauling crew. This means walking far out to the side canal, where a backup water source flows through a cracked stone channel. It's farther from the city center, which means more distance to carry the load, and more time to wonder why you didn't fake illness after all. The walk begins quietly. You and 3 others balance wide-mouthed jars on slings across your shoulders. The streets are quieter than usual, thick with dust and a lingering unease. A camel groans nearby. It sounds like how you feel. When you reach the canal, you find it's not so much flowing as pondering movement. The water sits low, sluggish, greenish. Frogs plop in the distance. The air smells of algae, forgotten sandals, and what might be. Goat breath. You dip your jar. The water resists. It's warm, heavy, viscous in a way that water shouldn't be. Still, it's sacred now because you're told it has to be. You fill the jar, cap it with a reed mat, and hoist it onto your shoulder. Modern comparison. Imagine fetching soup from a gutter, then carrying it home like it's family heirloom wine. You walk the whole way back hunched like a barley plant in drought. The jar sloshes, your back cries, and your knees threaten mutiny. When you finally reach the temple gate, your shirt is soaked, not from water but from existing near water in this heat. Inside, panic is beginning to ripple. With low water supply, the brewing schedule is disrupted. Some batches must be delayed. Others rushed before the last jars dry up. The priests argue over priorities. Do they brew for the gods first? For the nobles, for the workers? Answer, not. For the workers, you're pulled into the chaos immediately. Your task, assist with a rushed small batch brew for the afternoon offering. It must be done in a quarter of the usual time. With half the water and none of the divine patience, you grab a mixing bowl, dried barley, and a fistful of herbs. The mash is thick, reluctant to stir. It moves like old porridge, resistant, spiteful. You stir anyway, because you've lost the capacity for protest. Beside you, a new apprentice is adding too much date paste. The priest catches him and nearly chokes on his own disapproval. You save the batch with a splash of the brackish canal water. It hisses, you hiss, everyone pretends it didn't happen. Later, when the mash is cooling, the jars for fermentation are brought in. You inspect one and find cracks forming round the neck. A silent curse. You run to the potter's quarter, request a replacement. Already promised to the old keepers, the potter says. You offer him a broken bracelet in trade. He accepts. You don't miss the bracelet. You do miss dignity. Back in the brewery, the batch is bubbling prematurely. The heat is intense. You kneel beside it, stir gently, and whisper whatever words come to mind, something between a chant and a plea. The priest pauses and frowns. You're not authorized to speak incantations. You shrug. Wasn't for them. You're sent to the temple rooftop to collect drying herbs. The sun is blinding. The rooftop smells like cracked wood and loneliness. You shuffle between rows of trays filled with shriveled leaf sage, mint, fennel. One you think might just be grass. You gather the driest, knowing it'll go straight into the fermentation vats to cover any taste of desperation. As you head back down, a child messenger intercepts you. New request. He says the water's to be rationed. Half jars only from now on. You relay the message to the brewing team. Everyone groans. Mir throws her spoon. It bounces harmlessly off a vat and lands in her lap. Ox doesn't react. He's asleep, standing up. You adjust the ratios. Less water means thicker mash. More strain on the reed filters. More chance of sediment in the final product. More work, less reward. Someone spills a cup. You catch yourself about to yell. But don't. It's not his fault. You just mop it silently and move on. Evening approaches. The heat refuses to leave. You're drenched, covered in clay dust, sweat, barley flecks, and something that might be pigeon droppings. You help carry the afternoon offering to the altar, 3 small jars instead of the usual 5. The priest performs the ritual with practiced solemnity. No one mentions the shortage. The gods are watching, or pretending not to. After the offering, you're told to drain the dregs from yesterday's batch. You approach the fermentation vat and peer inside. It's steaming. Bubbles rise lazily from the surface. A layer of yeast floats on top like a beige skin. The smell is sharp and musty. You ladle it out, slowly, carefully, into the waste bowl. You try not to gag. It tries not to splash. A priest appears with a tablet. He records the volume of the waste. Excess. He mutters and scratches a line beside your name. You want to correct him. You don't. Dinner that night is thin gruel and a single date. The others eat in silence. The boy apprentice still looks rattled from his earlier mistake. You pat his shoulder. He flinches. You leave it there. As night falls, you linger near the basin. The water level has dropped visibly. Frogs croak in the distance, annoyed. The air is heavier now, as if holding its breath. You sit on the basin's edge. Your feet throb. Your hands are raw. Your soul is somewhere between soggy and resigned. Then, as the last light fades, a cool wind stirs the surface of the basin. Just once, you breathe it in. It's not hope, but it's close. You know something's wrong the moment you step into the brewery courtyard. It isn't the smell, that's the same stew of barley husk, singed reeds, and spiritual expectation. And it isn't the heat, that's still the usual early morning olive air with the texture of baked clay. It's the stillness. The workers are quieter. The priests are muttering. Even the ever-present brewery dog has retreated under the grain cart and is pretending not to exist. You find Mira near the fermentation vats, pale and tight-lipped. She doesn't greet you. Something happened last night, she says, not looking up. One of the small batch jars exploded. You blink. Exploded. She nods. They found the shards lodged in the storage hut wall. You walk with her to the scene, sure enough. One of the jars, once a plump amphora marked for a temple, guests has shattered completely, spraying barley beer and ceramic teeth in every direction. The dried splatter stains the wall in a crescent arc. A priest is inspecting the mess with a frown carved into his face like a tablet inscription, fermented to fast. He mutters, or was cursed. Or both. Another chimes in. Historians still argue whether jar explosions were due to natural pressure from over-fermentation or divine disapproval. You suspect it was pressure. You also suspect the gods are not above comedic timing. The overseer points to you and Mira. Clean it. He says, you gather a basket, a reed broom, and a rag that smells like the underside of a dead camel. Carefully, you sweep the shards into the basket, every piece a reminder that even sacred beverages have limits. The beer residue has soaked into the floor and dried into something sticky. You scrub. It resists. The priest reappears as you're mopping. We'll need to re-sanctify the storage room. He says, bring incense and sage and barley ash. You nod, already regretting everything. Back in the storeroom, the priest chants while you sprinkle ash into the corners and wave smoldering herbs through the air like a nervous mosquito. The room now smells like spiced bread and spiritual doubt. After the re-sanctification, you're told to inspect the remaining jars. There are 12, each sealed with a plug of clay and a twist of cloth. You tap them gently, listening for a tone. One sounds off, dull, heavy. You crack it open slightly and catch the smell immediately. Sour, sharp, and hostile. That batch is turning. You flag it. Then run through the usual routine, add extra herbs, check the temperature, stir clockwise, pray a little. Nothing helps. The brew is angry. It foams in a way that beer shouldn't. You reseal it and label it for purification. That means burial or burning. Sometimes the gods prefer beer as smoke. You're told to rest for a moment. You take a seat under the date tree in the courtyard. Ox is there, asleep as usual. Mouth open like he's mid-song. The boy apprentice sits across from you, holding a broken paddle. It snapped while I was stewing. He says miserably. You look at it. It was old. To try. To use. You pat his shoulder. Welcome to the club. You're handed a fresh task by the supervisor, something that sounds like a punishment and a reward at the same time. You're on yeast detail. Double quotes again. Yeast. You've come to understand. Is not cultivated here. It is courted. It lives in the air, the walls, the very cracks of the temple floor. You're told to harvest it gently, as if it were shy. You gather your bowl, your spatula, and your most respectful facial expression. The western wall of the brewery, the so-called living wall, is thick with generations of baked on. Foam, yeast, and dust. You scrape delicately, collecting the dry flakes and slightly gooey patches into the bowl. Every time you think you're done, the light catches another glimmer of fermentation. Someone walks past and calls you the yeast whisperer. You pretend it's a compliment. You return the bowl to the mixing station, where Mir is ready with the day's barley mash. It's cooler than usual because the water rationing has continued and thicker. The stirring is harder. The yeast is reluctant. You coax it in gently. Sprinkle it like salt over porridge, and then knead the mix with your whole forearm. It resists. Then bubbles. Mir grins. Still got it, she says. The mixture goes into the fermentation jar. You seal it with a clay lid. Press a barley stalk into the top for a lock, and say the half prayer the elder brewers always mutter. Let it rise. Let it rest. Let it not explode. By late afternoon, the priest announces a sudden divine tasting. Apparently, a new priestess has arrived from the northern provinces, and she is to be honored with a fresh pour from today's small batch. Boo! You scramble to prepare a clean vessel, which means scouring it with vinegar and mint and praying that no spider has taken up residence. You pour the beer still young, still frothy into the cup. You carry it carefully to the ceremony chamber, balancing the tray like it's made of fire and consequences. The priestess is younger than you expected, sharp-eyed and serious. She accepts the cup, sips once, and nods. Then pauses, then sips again. It's complex, she says. That is either a blessing or a curse. No one moves. The priest beside her clears his throat. It pleases the gods, he announces quickly. You bow, deeply, carefully. The rest of the day is a blur of sweeping, holding, and trying not to breathe too deeply near the sour batch. You're told to prepare a fire for ritual disposal, which means dragging the cracked jar into the courtyard pit and building a careful bed of reeds round it. You light it. The beer boils. It hisses. It smokes like old bread. You step back, face shining with heat. A priest sprinkles incense on the flames. You think you hear it sigh. That night, dinner is delayed. You share a stolen fig with Mira, who tells you the priestess asked about the yeast mixture. You nod. You are not sure what that means, but it feels important. You return home late. Your sandals are caked with ash. Your shoulders itch from the fire smoke. Your ears ring faintly from all the chanting. At your door. You sit and sip a bit of leftover gruel. It's cold and sticky. The stars shimmer overhead. You think about the yeast on the wall, the sour jar in the pit, the sharp nod from the priestess. The gods are drinking strange things lately. And so are you. The air is heavy before you even leave. Your mat. Not just warm, loaded. The kind of weight that presses on your eardrums and makes birds fall silent. You sit up slowly, instinctively checking the corners of your room for signs of divine displeasure. No frogs, no snakes, no ominous mold growth. Good enough. But the temple feels different when you arrive. Not frantic like on feast days, not hushed. Like after funerals tense. Something unsaid thickens the air between workers. You catch snippets. A sick priest. A broken seal. A mix-up with offerings. Nothing solid. Just enough to prickle your skin. You head straight for the brewery. The gate creaks more than usual. Inside, ox is already straying. Mirror is already muttering. And the apprentice is very clearly pretending to look busy. You can't blame him. You're handed a thin clay tablet. Today, you're on record keeping duty. Your first thought is, finally, something that doesn't involve your back. Your second is, you're about to become the scapegoat for everything that goes wrong today. The tablet has 3 columns: date, grain weight, and jar count. The stylus is cracked. The ink pot is dry. You wet the stylus in your mouth and start scraping barley numbers like a monk of misfortune. Halfway through, a priest walks by and adds a 4th column. Spillage, he says, and walks away. You briefly imagine spilling him. You track everything. The water levels from the well still low. The number of jars sealed, one with a suspicious wobble. And the status of the yeast batch frothy and belligerent. You squint at the stylus marks, which now resemble ancient curses. You've invented an entire system of tallying failure. Then, chaos, a loud crack, followed by shouting. You rush to the fermentation area, where a jar has tipped and is spilling its half-fermented contents across the floor. It's a river of grief, foaming and sour. You try to block it with a straw broom. The broom dissolves into porridge. The apprentice stands nearby, frozen. Mira grabs a cloth. You grab a pot together. You redirect the flood into a drainage hole, muttering every half-prayer you know. Let it pass. Let it ferment elsewhere. Let the gods have mercy on this mess. You're soaked in barley mash from the knees down. You scrape at the stone with your hands, trying to save the area from becoming a fermentation slip and slide. Once it's contained, the priest arrives. He looks at the mess, then at you. This is going on the tablet. You nod. Of course it is. You mark it down. 1 jar, contaminated, cause unknown, blame pending. The rest of the day is an exercise in avoidance. You lug near the storage hut, pretending to count amphorae. You reorganize the herb bundles by scent. You volunteer to sweep the entry path just so you can be alone. That's when you hear it. Coughing, a wet, guttural sound from the shadows near the well. You investigate cautiously and find one of the priests sitting on a stone bench, hunched, pale, lips dry. He waves you off, but not before you see the stain on his robe. Beard. You return to the brewery and whisper to Mira. She stiffens. He drank from the spoiled batch. Didn't he? You nod. I think so. She sighs. That's the 3rd this week. The whispers start again. Not just among workers now, among priests. Some say the bad batch was cursed. Others suspect it was tampered with. You overhear a god mention poison. Historians still argue whether temple contamination in Babylon was ever sabotage or just the natural consequence of storing liquid in porous jars beside goats. You're sent to inspect the remaining sealed amphorae for tampering. You test the stoppers, sniff the rims, tap the jars for inconsistencies. One sounds hollow, one smells off. One has a thin crack running down its base that looks almost carved. You show it to the overseer. He frowns and sends for a priest. A full inspection is declared. Every jar will be tested. Every ladle examined. Every reed filter ray-woven.ur. Placed in charge of tasting. Naturally. The process is grim. Cup after cup of lukewarm, vaguely sour beer. You taste hints of fennel, notes of mold, undertones of desperation. Some are safe. Some are ambiguous. You start spitting instead of swallowing. You begin to hallucinate barley stalks bending to whisper secrets. By sundown, you've lost sensation in your tongue and gained a splitting headache. You've declared 5 jars questionable, 3 jars unusable, and 1 actively evil. You log it all on the tablet. The final line reads, Batch 9, disposed, possible foul play. The priest reads it. He asks you what you mean. You shrug. Maybe someone forgot the date paste. He squints at you. You say nothing more. Dinner is delayed while the temple debates what to do. You sit with the apprentice near the herb wall. He asks if people ever die from temple beer. You nod. Not usually from the beer itself, but from what happens after. He doesn't ask what that means. That night, the courtyard is tense. The usual dog is gone. The wind is strange, cool and sharp. You wonder if the gods are watching or laughing. At the shrine near your door, someone has left a small loaf of blackened bread and a cup of water. You don't touch it. You just sit. Thinking about jars. Thinking about yeast. Thinking about how easy it is for sacred things to go sour. You don't want to get up. You don't even pretend. You lie on your mat with one arm over your face and wait for the weight of obligation to finally tip you out of sleep. It doesn't. You have to do it yourself, dragging each limb into motion like it's made of stone and regret. You sit up slowly, feeling like someone folded you wrong in the night. Your feet touch the floor judges you. When you reach the temple gates, you notice something new. Iskybe young, clean, suspiciously well-rested, is sitting under a canopy with a stack of clay tablets. He beckons you over. Daily measures, he says, sliding one toward you. You're being reassigned. You blink. To what? He doesn't look up. Inventory and record-keeping. You'll be assisting the ledger priest. You say nothing. This is either punishment or punishment with better shade. You're escorted to a back room of the temple, a dark, cool chamber lined with shelves of clay tablets. There's a smell of dust, old lamps, and deep, permanent bureaucracy. A man sits cross-legged at the center of it all, scratching symbols into wet clay with the serenity of someone who knows exactly where his next meal is coming from. He gestures you forward. Grain counts, production logs, mismeasurements. Start with that shelf. You sit. You scratch. You copy numbers so repetitive they start to look like tiny barley stalks. But soon enough, you notice patterns. The jars delivered don't always match the grain allocated. The numbers shift subtly depending on who's supervising the batch. One priest always records less foam waste. Another marks more water used, even on dry days. None of it is catastrophic. Just uneven. You keep scratching. You pause on one line. Batch 12. Loss. 1 amphora. Justified. Theft. You stare at that word. Theft. You don't remember a theft. No one mentioned a theft. And you, of all people, would have noticed an amphora going missing. It's not like someone can sneak one into a robe and walk out. You make a mark beside it, just a small one. Then another line catches your eye. Date SERP allotment adjusted. Reason, priestly need. You tilt your head. Back in the brewery, you'd joked that the priests probably drank the best batches before the gods ever saw them. Now it doesn't feel like a joke. After a few hours, the ledger priest stands, stretches, and wanders out to argue with someone about ink. You take your chance. You Cross-reference 3 tablets, matching batch numbers to their grain inputs, jar counts, and ritual usage. It doesn't add up, not even close. One batch was counted twice, one was never recorded, and another marked as use for foreign dignitaries was made on a day you personally spent in the yeast room D. Living with a rat infestation, you put the tablets down slowly. You are not sure what to do with this knowledge, so you do nothing. You scratch more symbols. You clean the stylus. You wait. By midday, the brewery is missing you. The apprentice finds you in the archive room and begs you to come back. Ox tried to mash the barley with a shovel, he says. Mirror through a ladle. There's yelling. You return. The brewery looks the same, smells the same. Feels like coming home to a family argument in progress. Mira is red-faced and shouting at a junior priest. You can't just change the ratio. That's not how yeast works. Ox is drinking something suspiciously frothy. You take your old paddle and step into the fray. The mash is too thin. Someone added water from the new cistern, and it's clearly not up to standard. You stir, trying to salvage it. You fold in some old herbs. You mutter a barley prayer. The batch thickens, the foam calms. The priest stops, frowning. No one thanks you, but Mir grunts. That's close enough. Later, you corner her near the storage hut. Have you ever lost a batch too? Miscounting. You ask. She squints. What kind of miscounting? Like, not a mistake, but on purpose. She doesn't answer right away. Once, she says, a few years ago, a special batch went missing. Disappeared before the offering. Priest said it spoiled. We all knew it didn't. What happened? She shrugs. Nothing. We brewed again. What else could we do? You nod. The next task is minor. Preparing sample jars for the next solstice. You fill 5. Seal them. And mark each with the temple stamp. A barley stalk inside a sun. You notice. One jar is already stamped. Even though you haven't touched it yet, you make another quiet mark in your mind. Dinner is late again. Mira shares a bruised pomegranate. You chew slowly, seeds crunching like secrets. You sit under the fig tree afterward. The sky is purple. The wind has turned. Cooler. The apprentice joins you, kicking at the dust. Do you ever think the gods don't care about the beer? He asks. You smile. I think they care, just not for the reasons we do. He frowns. Like what? You consider. Maybe they care that we care. He thinks about that, then shrugs. Before bed, you visit the archive room one more time. The ledger priest is asleep, slumped over a half-scratched tablet. You slip in quietly. You slide the theft tablet onto the shelf upside down. No one will find it now. Not quickly. You are not sure why you do it. Protection, pity, exhaustion. You step out into the night, where the stars blink softly like eyes pretending not to see. You walk home slower than usual. Because the gods are watching, and so are the ledgers. The sun rises with its usual smugness, spilling over mud brick rooftops like it owns the place. You wake already sweating. Not from heat, not yet, but from a dream in which your fingers were made of barley and someone kept trying to mash you into a vat. You stretch your hands. They're still yours for now. On your way to the brewery, you notice the guards at the temple gate are doubled today. That's never a good sign. Inside, the courtyard is abuzz, but not with the good kind of buzz. No songs, no jokes. Just quick footsteps, hushed conversations, and eyes that dart sideways before meeting yours. You find Mira near the storage hut. She doesn't look up. What's going on? You ask. She nods toward the scribe's platform. Someone's reading, aloud, suspicion of tampering with sacred offerings, fermentation failure resulting in ceremonial insult, consequences pending investigation. You blink, Dot, this is it. The bad batch from days ago, the one that spoiled fast, hissed at you, smelled like vinegar and crushed dreams, has been officially declared a spiritual offense, not a mishap. Not a natural accident, a deliberate insult to the gods. Someone, somewhere, is going to take the blame. You feel it like a hand pressing on your chest. The priests begin questioning workers one by one. Ox is led away first, chewing on a date as if he doesn't realize the gravity of the situation. Mira goes next. You watch her disappear into the side chamber. Shoulders square, Dot, when they call you. You don't move right away. You are led into a small room. Two priests sit across from you. One holds a tablet. The other holds a stylus like it's a weapon. Did you assist with batch 9? One asks, you nod. Did you witness anyone tamper with the contents? You shake your head. Did you personally select the date paste? You hesitate. It was premixed. You weren't even near the ingredients that day. You explain that. They nod, but not kindly. Did you report anything suspicious at the time? You consider telling them about the odd readings in the ledger, about the amphora that appeared, sealed before you even filled it, about the priest who always seems to take a cup before anyone else. Instead, you say, I didn't understand what I was seeing. They exchange glances. You're dismissed. Back outside. The others are waiting. Mira is pacing. Ox is asleep. Again. The apprentice looks like he might cry. They're going to blame someone. Mira says, it's just a matter of who's slowest. You return to your tasks as if nothing's changed, cleaning the ladles, scraping the mash bowl, measuring grain. But the air is heavy now, not from heat, but from suspicion. You're reassigned to the new batch, a small offering for a local merchant's wedding blessing. It's simple, nothing sacred, just symbolic. You stir with method, carefully. Your every move feels observed. The apprentice stirs beside you, slower than usual. His hands tremble. You whisper to him, stick to the rhythm. That's all the gods want. He nods, blinking hard. At midday, a priest enters the brewery and points at one of the workers coming. A quiet man with steady hands and an empty face. No one knows much about him. He stands, says nothing, and walks with the priest. You don't see him again that day. You eat your barley cakes in silence. Mira doesn't sit with you. Later, the priest calls for the full brewery team. You gather near the vats and sure if this is an execution or a lecture. From this day forward, he says, all batches will be double recorded, all grain weighed twice, all date paste measured in the presence of a scribe. He gestures to a young man beside him holding a new clay tablet. This is the god of ledgers. He watches now. You glance at Mira. She rolls her eyes. You're told to return to work. Nothing else is said about Gamin. The batch continues. You boil the mash, skimming the foam with practiced ease. You whisper your have prayers. You check the temperature with your palm. Like a baker, the apprentice smiles at you once, just once. You smile back. At sundown. You are called again this time not to the questioning chamber, but to the ziggurat. You've never been this high. The stairs wind upward in deliberate spirals, and your legs start to shake halfway up. A priest leads you silently. No explanation. At the top, a stone altar, a vessel, a single cup. You are to pour. You lift the jug with both hands. The beer is warm, dark, slow-moving. You tip it carefully. It lands in the cup with a soft glop, almost. Reverend. The priest nods. The gods have accepted your offering. He says, you exhale, deeply. The stars are just beginning to prick the sky. You can see the brewery from here, the walls, the courtyard, the faint flicker of torches. You wonder who's watching. You wonder who isn't. You descend slowly, step by step, at your door. You sit again, too tired to eat, too awake to sleep. You think about gamin. You think about yeast and trust, and how sometimes the gods drink what they're given and stay silent. You return to work the next morning and everything is normal, to normal. Ox is already at the mash station, stirring with his usual slow rhythm. Mira is wiping down the herb trays like nothing happened. The apprentice nods at you with that same nervous energy he's always had, and yet something in the air feels newly brittle. Like a pottery jar along in the kiln. You don't ask about gamin. No one does. Your name is already carved into the slate for the day. Final delivery duty. Not brewing. Not stirring. Not tasting, delivering. This should be easy. You've done it a dozen times, carrying sealed jars to the temples in a sanctum, placing them beside stone altars, bowing once and leaving before your sweat can stain the floor. But today's delivery is different. It's not just for temple use, it's for the ziggurat, the high altar, the place where only priests and gods are supposed to meet. You are handed the offering jar. It's heavy, warm from fermentation, sealed with a perfect disc of red clay and tied with sacred twine that smells like cinnamon and firewood. A barley stalk is pressed into the seal. You can't help but notice the slight smear of old blood on the rim ritual. No doubt, you are not meant to ask to gods escort you through the winding temple halls, past painted pillars and stone carvings of lions with human eyes. At the base of the ziggurat steps, the priests pause, murmuring, blessing neither of them seems to believe. You ascend. The steps are narrow, slanted, unkind. Each one makes your thighs scream louder than the last. By the halfway point, you've shifted the jar twice on your shoulder, rotating it carefully like a baby god. By the top, your arms are trembling. There, in the center of the platform, sits a wide basin carved from black stone. The air is thinner. Here, windier, sacred, the priest gestures. You approach and, with a reverence you didn't know you still had, untie the cord, remove the seal, and pour. The beer gurgles out slow, like honey with a limp. It splashes into the basin and pools there. Catching the first rays of sun, the priest begins to chant. You step back. It's supposed to end there. But then the priest hands you a second vessel, this one smaller, a personal cup. For you, he says. You stare at him. For your hands, he clarifies. They have not failed. You lift the cup. It's still warm. You drink. It's sharp, dark, still fermenting at the edges, but clean in a way nothing has tasted in weeks. It rolls down your throat like the idea of rain. You lower the cup, say nothing. He nods once and turns away. You descend slowly, legs wobbling, brain reeling from the alcohol and the fact that you were just thanked in a language made entirely of gestures. Back at the brewery, the day continues. Another batch begins. Mira is arguing with the apprentice about reed filters. Ox is asleep, standing up. Everything is exactly the same. Except that it's not. You sit near the wall, the yeast wall. You run your fingers across its surface. It's drier now, less vibrant, as if it too has been watching. You are handed the record tablet again, and this time, you scratch your name on it without being asked. You check the grain storage, 1 sack less than noted. You check the date paste, to warm. You take mental notes and record nothing. You help stir the next batch. The heat is comforting. The foam rises like it remembers you. Mira hums a chant from 3 festivals ago. You share a barley cake with her. Apprentice. He's smiling more. You are not sure if that's growth or a survival tactic. Either way, you let him. That evening, before the offering, the priest pulls you aside. "We'll need you to teach the new scribes," he says, "about measurements, inventory, consistency." You stare at him. "I'm not a scribe." He shrugs. "You're accurate. That's more valuable. You know teaching won't be easy. The new scribes think yeast is something you control. You'll have to show them it's something you listen to. Dinner is quieter than usual. Not solemn, just full. You eat slowly. You sit under the fig tree. You think about every cracked jar, every spoiled batch, every grain you've ever lifted with your aching hands. You think about what this work does to people, and what it makes them become. The apprentice walks over, holding two small cups. This one's from the new batch. He says, "We did it right." You drink. It's sweet, smooth, still warm, still wild. You close your eyes and breathe it in. Tomorrow, the barley starts again. But tonight, you've traveled far. You've brewed for gods. You've witnessed fire, yeast, shadow, and steam. And now, you get to rest. Tonight you've traveled far, through cracked brick courtyards and smoke-heavy halls, up temple steps worn by centuries of breathless prayers, and into the very heart of a brewery where barley wasn't just a crop, it was communion. You've stirred until your arms gave out. You've hauled jars heavier than guilt. You've tasted offerings brewed with ritual and rumors alike. But now the vats are still. The fire is out, and the beer, sacred or otherwise, has finished bubbling. You can ease your shoulders. Let your back remember what it's like not to bend. Let your hands, grain-stained and calloused, settle quietly at your side. Let the echoes of chanting fade into the soft hum of night. The gods aren't angry. Not tonight. The ledgers are closed. The apprentice is sleeping. Mirror 2. Even ox has stopped chewing. Your work is done. No one is waiting for you to lift another amphora or scrape another stone bowl. No one will ask you for barley counts or verbal ratios, not until the next sunrise. For now, your breath can slow, your eyes can drift, your mind can wander somewhere quieter, where steam curls in gentle spirals and the only sound is bubbling comfort. Maybe tomorrow the yeast will misbehave again. Maybe the water will run dry. But tonight, you are still safe, soft, and maybe, just maybe, grateful for things like plumbing, refrigeration, and not being responsible for the happiness of invisible deities. Close your eyes. Let the story go. Let the brew rest. Let your pulse slow to the rhythm of barley rising. The gods have drunk, and you may finally sleep.